Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education, featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host, Alexis Avila.
Hi everyone, this is Alexis Avila of Prepped and Polished, a tutoring and test prep firm that provides in-person and online tutoring for college and grad school and private school admission tests, and academic subject tutoring such as math, science, English, languages, and study skills coaching. For more information, please check out preppedandpolished.com. And while you're there, go to preppedandpolished.com and sign up for our monthly newsletter. I welcome you to the new Prepped and Polished podcast, where we interview amazing and inspiring guests in the world of education, as well as offer tutoring and test prep tip podcasts, lessons, and updates. Get to know the Prepped and Polished community. You can find us on Facebook, Prepped and Polished, Twitter, @Prepped Polished, and Instagram, Prepped and Polished 1. You can submit a question at any time to radio@preppedandpolished.com. I love hearing from you. Joining our show today is Julia Wojnar, founder of Unleash Your Presence, a public speaking coaching firm based in New York City, but she works with clients worldwide. A natural performer and speaker since a young age, Julia helps students and professionals break down speaking prep into manageable pieces from start to finish. On today's episode, Julia shares her best tips for any student getting ready for any type of public speaking engagement, from classroom presentations to those dreadful college interviews. And she'll also tell you what not to do in preparation for your presentations. Julia Wojnar, thanks for coming on the Prepped and Polished podcast. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me, Alexis.
Great. Can you focus on a couple of pivotal moments that brings you here with us today as a public speaking expert and coach to help people really unleash their speaking presence?
Yes. Well, Alexis, unlike a lot of people, my love for public speaking actually started from a really young age. When I was about 8 years old, I actually started doing theater, and that was where my love for the stage really came from. And I continued to do that for about the next 20 years or so, and so I really got a sense of feeling comfortable performing in front of people. And then my introduction to really getting formal training in public speaking began when I was a senior in high school. I actually took a public speaking class, which was the freshman level public speaking course offered by Syracuse University. And it was through that course that I really discovered how to actually structure and deliver different kinds of speeches. And that was a really great training for me, because as the course went on and the speeches got longer and more difficult, I learned what it took to really, to really persuade and also, structure a speech with your content so that it makes sense and you get your point across clearly.
Wow, that's amazing, and I love how you started at such a young age. So that's really cool. And now you established a company, and I was wondering what types of services does Unleash Your Presence provide, and how do you help students and professionals?
Absolutely. So at Unleash Your Presence, I work with professionals and students and entrepreneurs to teach them how to rock their speaking engagements. So in my signature program, I take them through the preparation process so that when it comes time for them to go give their speech, they know exactly what they have to say and they can really deliver it with confidence. So I help take them through that process step by step, so it doesn't have to be just another thing for you to worry about. And I also do targeted intensives as well, where I deep dive with clients into just one particular issue that might be holding them back in their speaking. So it really makes a difference of going from good to great.
Wow. And do you do a little bit of, do you sit in silence and watch one of your clients do a speech and give some feedback? Is that part of what you do?
Absolutely, yeah. So I always like to give feedback to my clients at first, and sometimes sort of a role-playing type of exercise with them where I'll just sit and listen and give them my feedback as if I'm the audience member. And I've had clients really get even nervous just doing it in front of me, but I always like to, if you can do it in front of me first, where you're afraid, what I'll think, then once you can do that, then, you can expand to doing it in front of a few friends, and then from there to larger groups of audiences. So it really just gives them that practice and feedback so that by the time that the real deal comes, it's not the first time that they've done it.
Perfect. And what do you find is the biggest struggle people face when dealing with an upcoming public speaking engagement? And how does working with a speaking coach help correct any problems?
Yeah, so the biggest struggle that I often see when people are preparing for a speaking engagement is that they just get extremely nervous right before the speech, and especially right before they go on in those few moments before they get on stage. So what I do as a speaking coach is I teach them ways to alleviate those nerves. Because the truth is that everybody feels it to an extent when you get on stage. It's a lot of energy coming at you, but a lot of people just don't know how to deal with that. And so they tend to shut down a little bit or not really give the best presentation that they can. So what I do is I actually work with my clients to not only help get them prepped for the engagement, but really give them some strategies that they can use right in those moments, right before they go out, to help them deal with those nerves. And I know a mentor of mine always used to use the term front-loading the work when you're preparing to go into a high-pressure situation like going to give a speech or going to be interviewed. He would always say that if you front-load the work and you're really putting forth about 95% of your effort before the time even comes to do it, then by the time you have to go give the speech, you already know exactly what you have to say, and it makes it so much easier to deal with those nerves when you have front-loaded that work.
Sign me up. Love that approach. Love preparation. That's great. Can anyone become a public speaker, or do you have to be like a born extrovert or have a gift?
Absolutely. I love this question, Alexis, because I think it's really one of the biggest myths out there.
Okay.
Is that people believe that you really have to be super extroverted or naturally charismatic to be a good public speaker. But what I know to be true is that public speaking is really just a skill like any other skill that can be developed through practice and study. So through the development of the skill, anyone can really improve their abilities and become the speaker that they really want to be.
That's awesome. Really encouraging. Now, what about for those high schoolers? Because they do a lot of speaking. So what types of advice would you have for, say, some teens, high schoolers, getting ready for those dreadful college admissions interviews?
Yeah, so I remember preparing for those interviews myself, and that's the biggest tip that I would give to students preparing for those interviews is to really give it the due diligence that it deserves. And when we talked about front-loading that work, this is exactly an instance where that comes into play. So what students really want to do is think about some of those common questions that they might be asked in the interview, and actually think about how they might respond to those questions, and do some mock interviews if you can before the interview, either with parents or maybe if you have a counselor that you work with. That way, once you go into the interview, it doesn't feel like it's the first time and all the pressure's on. And I actually remember when I was in a particular college interview myself, I was asked a kind of offbeat question that took me by surprise a little bit, and that definitely was not something that I saw coming. But in those moments, I just thought to myself that I just need to answer the question in the way that made the most sense to me, because those kind of questions are really more designed to see how you think and how you'll respond to the question rather than giving a particular right or wrong type of answer.
That's awesome. And let's say a student's preparing for a class presentation, and those are overwhelming because it's usually you have like one of them at the end of the year. What are some things that he should avoid doing when preparing and giving a presentation and such like a class presentation?
Yeah, so I would first off say definitely try to avoid winging it if you can.
Okay.
And I'm actually thinking back to a particular time that I was in college giving a final presentation with my group at the end of the year, and turns out that I came down sick with a fever that day.
Oh.
And if it were up to me, I would have just stayed home and not given the presentation at all. But of course I had to for my grades. And that was something that I never could have anticipated beforehand. But given that I'd already done my prep and knew what I had to say, I was able to, take some meds and go in and do it anyway. And I know if I hadn't put in that prep beforehand, then it probably would have gone all downhill.
Yeah.
So that's the first piece of advice I would say, is definitely try to avoid winging it and put in your prep time beforehand. Another tip that I would give to students is actually to avoid trying to be funny, because unless you're really a naturally funny person or you've tested out particular jokes before the presentation, you don't really know how your audience might react to it. And if your joke falls flat, you're at risk of losing the audience completely. So I would say to just really focus more on your strengths. And if you are funny, great, but for some of us, it doesn't come naturally. So if it doesn't, I would say to avoid that. And a final tip that I would give for students preparing for those presentations is, if you're incorporating a PowerPoint into it, to avoid making it too text-heavy. Because if there's a lot of text on your slides, then it can become really distracting, and you'll find that you'll probably have people in the audience who are more concentrated on reading your slides than they are on what you're saying. So the best PowerPoints that I've seen are really more visual, and they're just complementing what the speaker is saying.
Wow. Those are some incredible tips, and I love the the tip on trying not to be funny, because you put too much pressure on yourself trying to impress people, and you could shoot yourself in the foot. So,
right, exactly.
So that is awesome. And what is the most rewarding part of your work?
For me, to see the transformation that occurs when my clients achieve a breakthrough is really the most rewarding part. As we
Nice.
talked about earlier, one of the big myths that I still find that people have is that they don't really believe that they are great public speakers or that they can improve. And so when I see the transformation that occurs after just spending even a little bit of time prepping and working through the particular issues that people face, especially around their nerves, to see how they improve and how their confidence improves once they see that it's possible for them, that's truly rewarding for me.
Fantastic. And what is next for Unleash Your Presence? What kinds of cool stuff are you up to?
Yes, so I'm continuing to work with clients one-on-one, and I actually work with folks all over via Skype, so that's been a really great way for me to connect with people, because then I can serve them whether they're local or states or even countries away. And this spring I'm actually doing a lot more in-person workshops here in New York City where I'm based. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to, getting in front of people and doing some live training there as well.
Fantastic. And what is the best way to get a hold of you?
So the best way for folks to find me is through my website, which is unleashyourpresence.com. And from there, they can schedule a complimentary discovery call to assess their needs and if we're a fit to work together. And on my homepage there's also a link to sign up for my audio newsletter, where I give my best tips and stories related to speaking every couple of weeks.
That's amazing. To the kids or teens listening to the podcast today, any advice for them before they cross that bridge into young adulthood?
Yeah, so I would say that college and young adulthood is a time of great discovery. And I would tell teens that the biggest thing that college really taught me is that it's a test of your ability to motivate and manage yourself. And whether you're an entrepreneur like myself or you work in a profession, I think this is one of the biggest skills that it takes to succeed. And so the sooner you can learn how to do that well, the more successful you'll be.
Awesome. Julia, thanks for coming on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Alexis.
This wraps up our show today with public speaking expert Julia Wojnar of Unleash Your Presence. To learn more about Julia's amazing work with students and professionals, please check out www.unleashyourpresence.com, www.unleashyourpresence.com. And make sure to check out episode 65. We'll be doing our next tutoring tips episode. Thank you for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.